Hello, welcome to More Faith with Kisha. My first name is Kisha and my last name is Moore. And on this channel, we talk all things, most things faith. I love to give my faith testimonies to motivate, inspire, and to encourage you to keep the faith in your dreams, your goals, your aspirations, but most importantly, to keep your faith in God in the name of Jesus. Today, I want to give just a quick testimony regarding a time in my life where I left my job on faith, not having anything lined up. So, let me just give you a backstory, a back history of how I came to that conclusion or that decision. I have been in sales for most of my years, maybe like over 20 years. I have always had a sales job, and I've always excelled in sales, and I have always been, one of the top performers and something that I have always taken pride in. I was a person who's always worked overtime, was always there to, try to make those extra hours, to make extra sales, to make commission. I enjoyed it. It was something that I enjoyed doing. And I remember I started working for a insurance company. This was maybe like 10 years ago. And when I first started working for that company, it was actually like my dream job. The pay was good, the company culture was good, the management, the people that I work with, like everything was like really, really good. I had no complaints. I feel like I was getting rewarded fairly for the work that I was putting in. So within like 3.5 years of working for that company, the person who actually started the company, who did all the hiring, put together like the team, he actually left. And when he left, someone else was in charge. And it just became a really bad place to work for. The company that I once was on my knees praying for, I was now on my knees praying to leave. And I'm sure some of you understand how that is, how that can be. And I was just like, man, I just couldn't take it. It was just like very stressful. I suffered from anxiety, depression. It was just like really, really bad. And the requirements increased so much. It was like, wasn't realistic expectations. Like some of the people who worked with me, they started compromising, not keeping integrity on doing certain things, to try to keep up with the demand, to try to keep their pay at what it was, because people have bills and you have a certain lifestyle that you're used to. And when someone comes in, it was like, now you have to do twice the amount of work and you get 50% less of a pay. Like that can be very, very stressful, and I can understand why someone would be tempted to compromise, although I didn't. So within like 5 years into that company, it finally took a toll on me, and I left. And I should have left sooner, I believe. And I told myself, like, if I'm ever faced in a situation where I'm working for a company and it becomes very, very toxic, like, I'm not going to stay. When it affects my mental health, my mental well-being, like, I'm not going to stay. And Father God, you have to back me up on this when it's time for me to leave. Like, I was just praying and just asking God, like, I just didn't feel like it was God to be in those type of environments and to adjust to stress, to adjust to headaches, to adjust to demands that are unrealistic, to adjust to increased quota with decreased pay. Like I really had to think about that. Like, I don't feel like this is God. And if I'm ever faced with a situation like this again, like I'm not going to stay. I'm not going to stay in a toxic work environment, because those things can affect your physical health. When you're under that amount of pressure, like that could really, really affect you. And I started to feel that. And so when I left, and I actually left the insurance industry for a few years. I was like, I will never be in the insurance industry again. And so I started working for another company. It was like a car dealership. In the first few months, it was like actually really good. And that turned for the worse, like very quickly. Like that company, that car dealership I was working for, it was very, very toxic. Like the person who was the management, he used to actually curse at the employees. He ain't never cursed at me because I wasn't having that. But he would curse, throw papers at the car salesman. I was like, okay, like this is not gonna work. And I remember like I really needed that job because I had just moved to Dallas. And like I mentioned in the previous video, when I moved to Dallas, like I didn't have any money saved. I didn't have a job lined up. I didn't know anyone. Like, so I really needed that job. But I needed my mental sanity more than I needed the job. And I remember everything that I went through with that previous insurance company that I worked for like 5 years when it became so toxic. And I vowed to myself that I will never stay at a company that is like this. So I remember one day I was sitting home and I was dreading going to work. I was like, I do not want to step foot in that place. It was that bad. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do, how I'm going to pay my rent. I only had like $1,000. My rent was like $1,250. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I wasn't going back there. And I felt peace. I felt God was telling me leave. And I actually left. A few weeks later, I ended up getting another job. And it was an okay job. The pay wasn't that good, but it was okay. It was something to kind of like hold me. I actually had to work 2 jobs. So now I go from making, good money at a toxic car dealership to working 2 jobs. But it was a season. It was a temporary season, something I had to do. I had to work those 2 jobs for a few months until God blessed me with something better. And so once I left and I'm now working the 2 jobs, I remember driving home. I'm not driving home, driving to work early in the morning and listening to my praise and worship music and just having a conversation with God and just telling God, like, God, I'm just believing you not for 2 jobs to cover my bills, but I'm believing you for one good job. And I want to make this amount of money. I want this amount of PTO. I want to work in this environment, this structure. These are all the things that I want. And that morning on my way to work, I actually get a call for an interview for a previous job that told me no, but they called me back and it was just a whole nother story with that. And I ended up getting hired. Now, I want to just encourage you. Yeah, it took faith. And I'm not telling you, again, this is a disclaimer. I'm not saying go and leave your job. You do what the Lord is telling you to do. If God is telling you to leave your job, leave. If God is telling you to stay, stay. But make sure whatever decision you make, it's a decision that God is telling you to make. I'm just giving my testimony, okay? So I ended up getting hired for a job making more money than I ever made in my entire life. And it was a blessing for a season. You guys, sometimes things are seasonal. When God opens up doors and give you these jobs, it's not meant for you to always stay for eternity until retirement. It could be or it could not be. Learn to pivot. Learn when God is telling you to move on to the next. If God blessed you with that, don't think he cannot bless you with more or bless you with better. I feel like I'm getting off track. So, as I was saying, it took faith for me to leave that toxic job when I didn't have a backup and I'm living in a state that I never left. But I remember the commitment that I made to myself that I will always make sure that I'm okay. Because a company will not make sure you're okay. They will use you and run you to the ground. And when you're gone, they hire the next person to do the same thing. Not every company is like that. But there are a lot of companies that are. I had to make sure I prioritized my mental health, that I prioritized Kisha, that I made sure that I didn't get so adjusted to verbal and mental abuse from management. I had to prioritize that. I had to make sure I put me first. And I put pressure on God, like, God, I know you love me. I know that you want more for me. I know that you did not create me in my mother's womb. Well, you knew me before you created me in my mother's womb. And when you created me in my mother's womb, this is not what you had in mind for my life. For Kisha to go to work every day and be miserable and be unhappy. Not saying that just because you are having a bad season with the job or your sales is down that you just leave. No, sometimes you have to work through it. Sometimes you have to tough it out. Sometimes you have to get through the difficult patch, before you can get back up. Sometimes you go through things. You just have to know what season you're in. But I'm talking about when it's unbearable, when you know that it's really, really affecting you mentally and emotionally. My faith was to leave, and I left. And when I left, again, I was thinking, was that a good decision? But at the end of the day, I chose my peace. Sometimes you don't know how you're going to make it through. You don't know what God is going to do. You don't know how he's going to do it. That's why it's good to have a relationship with God, an intimate relationship with God, when you know that you can hear from him and you know when God is speaking to you and you know God's voice. Had I not left that job, God wouldn't have, I wouldn't have been able to walk through another door. I would have been so content and so complacent where I wouldn't have been put in a position of pressure to find something better and to believe God for more. So that is my testimony. I left a job on faith when I didn't have another job lined up because I believed that God wanted better for me, because I believed that God cared enough for me to not let me go through whatever it is that I was going through with that company. And because I believed that God would open up a bigger and better door. All right. So I hope this inspired you. It may not be for everyone, but I believe that it's for someone. If you're in a season and you're believing God for more in whatever area it is in your life, and you don't know if you're having a difficulties making the hard decision, just pray. Ask God to give you confirmation. And once you get that confirmation, just go and just leave it up to God to take care of you. He created you, so he has the responsibility to take care of you. All right, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe. Bye.